I need you to gather your things and move, now. There are passengers who have actually earned their seats in this cabin, and you being here is making them uncomfortable. She said it in a voice calibrated to sound like policy, clipped, official, slightly bored. But the words themselves were not policy, and everyone within 4 rows knew it. The man in seat 3A looked up at her. He did not reach for his bag. He did not stand. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they have seen before, something familiar in its smallness, and he said, "Can you show me the specific regulation you're citing?" She said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to cooperate." He said, "I'd like to see the policy documentation, please." She said, "Sir," and the word came out sharp as a pin, "I am asking you politely." Seat 3A was first class. The other passengers in first class had gone very quiet. A man in 2B appeared to be studying his window with unusual intensity. A woman in 4A was looking directly at the flight attendant in the way people look when they are deciding whether to speak and deciding finally not to. No one helped. No one spoke. And then the man in 3A reached into his jacket pocket and placed a thin metallic badge holder on the tray table in front of him. Not open, not displayed, just placed there quietly. And he said in a voice that was softer than the flight attendant expected, "I think you might want to make a phone call before this goes further." She had no idea what she was looking at. She had no idea who she was talking to. She was about to. Have you ever been told you didn't belong in a place you had more right to than anyone else in the room? Let me take you back. 22 hours. His name was Dr. Elston Raphael Okonkwo, and he had been awake for 18 of the last 22 hours, which was not unusual for him. He was 51 years old and had been an aeronautical engineer for 24 of those years, the last 11 of them as principal systems architect at Meridian Aerospace, a private engineering consultancy that had provided structural and avionics design work on 6 of the 11 aircraft types currently in regular commercial service. He did not bring this up in conversation. He was not the kind of man who brought things up in conversation. He was the kind of man who sat down at a problem for 12 hours and came up through the other side with a solution that other people spent the next decade refining. He was also the kind of man who flew frequently, sometimes as many as 40 segments per year, visiting client sites, attending certification reviews, sitting in on safety evaluations, and who had long ago learned to travel in first class not as a luxury but as a functional decision because he used flight time to work. He boarded flight 1174 out of Atlanta at 6:40 in the morning. He had been in Atlanta for 3 days attending a structural certification review for a new narrow-body configuration. He was returning to Seattle. He was tired in the specific way that comes from days of precision work, the kind of tired that lives behind the eyes and demands quiet. He had his laptop bag. He had his boarding pass for 3A. He had a mechanical pencil that had been in the breast pocket of his jacket for 11 years, the same one he had been holding when he signed off on the stress-tolerant specifications for the very class of aircraft he was now boarding. He sat down, opened his laptop, ordered a coffee, and was 3 pages into a technical review document when the flight attendant reached him. Now let's talk about Courtney Wexler, because what happened on flight 1174 did not begin with one person and one decision. Courtney Wexler had been a senior cabin crew member with Atlantic Continental Airways for 8 years. She was good at the portions of her job that were measurable, and she was difficult about the portions that required judgment. She had 2 formal complaints on her record, both from the last 14 months, both relating to passenger-facing conduct that her direct supervisor had described in both instances as contextually defensible. She had not been disciplined. She had received instead a coaching session each time. She had interpreted the coaching sessions as validation. She had a particular reading of the first-class cabin that she had developed over 8 years and never examined, a reading that assessed belonging based on a set of cues she had never articulated to herself but that lived in her reactions. The quality of the bag, the cut of the clothes, the face, the ease of movement, the apparent certainty of the person that they were supposed to be there. Dr. Okonkwo wore a gray fleece over a collared shirt. His laptop bag was 11 years old. He was not effortlessly groomed in the manner of someone who woke up thinking about how they looked. He was effortlessly focused in the manner of someone who woke up thinking about load-bearing equations. Courtney Wexler looked at him and made an assessment, and the assessment was wrong, and she acted on it. When he refused to move and asked for policy documentation, she went to the galley. She came back 2 minutes later. She said a passenger in business class had requested an upgrade and the airline needed the seat. He asked her when this request had been received and why it hadn't been processed at the gate. She did not answer. She said she was going to need to ask him one more time to please cooperate. He opened the badge holder on his tray table, turned it face up, and slid it toward her. It was his Meridian Aerospace credential, and on the same laminated card, in smaller type below his photograph, it listed his consultancy authorization codes for 3 of the 6 regulatory bodies that had certified the aircraft type they were currently sitting in. She looked at it. She looked at him. She did not understand what she was reading. She said, "Sir, this doesn't change the situation." He said, "I think you should call your operations manager." He said it gently. That was the thing his colleagues always noted about Elston. He was gentle when he was most certain, which was to say he was gentle when he was most dangerous. She called. The operations manager on duty that morning was a man named Terrence Bowl, who had been with the airline for 17 years and who had 4 years ago sat in a certification review for the aircraft's emergency egress system, in which one of the 2 engineers leading the review had been a man named Dr. Elston R. Okonkwo. Terrence heard the situation summary, then he asked for the seat number, then he asked for the passenger's name. Courtney gave it. There was a silence on the line that lasted 7 seconds. She counted them later. And then Terrence said, "Courtney, I need you to apologize to that passenger right now. Give him whatever he wants for the rest of the flight and go about your other duties. And I need you to not touch anything in his environment for the remainder of the flight. Am I clear?" She said, "But the passenger in busy..." Terrence said, "There is no passenger in business class requesting an upgrade. Am I clear?" She walked back to seat 3A. She stood in the aisle. Elston was already typing again. She said his name. He looked up. She said she was sorry for the disruption and that the situation had been resolved. He said, "Thank you," and looked back at his screen. She stood there for a moment, and in that moment she understood, not fully, not immediately, but enough, that there was something she had missed about this man. She said, "Is there anything I can get you?" He said, "Coffee, thank you." That was the entire exchange. The plane taxied. The flight departed on time. He worked for 4 hours without stopping. Go back to the moment he placed the badge holder on the tray table. He didn't open it dramatically. He didn't stand up. He didn't announce anything. He just placed it there face down and said, "Think about this before you go further." That was 11 years of certification work in a laminated card, and he carried it with the same quiet certainty he carried everything. The incident was reported by 2 passengers who had observed it from nearby seats independently on the airline's feedback system within 4 hours of landing. Both reports described what they had witnessed, both used specific language. Both mentioned the moment Courtney Wexler told Elston Okonkwo that passengers had earned their seats and that he had not. The airline's customer experience team flagged both reports for escalation within the standard protocol. The escalation triggered a request for the cabin crew report for the flight segment, the gate log, and the audio capture from the flight's internal communication system. The review took 3 weeks. Its findings were shared with Dr. Okonkwo's office through his executive assistant. The airline confirmed that no upgrade request had been received from any business class passenger for that flight segment before or after departure. The findings also confirmed that Courtney Wexler's account to her operations manager had contained a material inaccuracy. The review was referred to the airline's Human Resources and Compliance Division. That division's process, combined with the 2 prior complaints on record, resulted in Courtney Wexler's suspension pending a full conduct review. The airline's CEO issued a statement, not to the press but to Dr. Okonkwo directly, via a handwritten letter delivered to his office in Seattle. The letter acknowledged what had happened, described it clearly, and committed to a specific set of process changes at the cabin crew level. Updated training protocols, revised escalation standards, an independent review board for passenger conduct complaints. It also contained a personal paragraph that Elston did not share publicly but that his executive assistant later described when asked as the kind of paragraph that a person writes when they mean every word. He replied with a single paragraph of his own. He said he appreciated the letter. He said the process changes were the right ones. He said he hoped the people involved in reviewing the event would take from it not punishment but understanding. He signed it and he folded it and he sent it and then he went back to work because there was a structural resonance issue on a new fuselage configuration that had been waiting for his attention for 3 days. 6 months after the incident, Meridian Aerospace and Atlantic Continental Airways entered into a renewed consulting engagement. One that Dr. Okonkwo had quietly recommended to his firm's managing director because he believed the airline was genuinely trying to do better and because he had always cared about the airplanes more than about the people who had failed to recognize him on them. The new engagement included a standing invitation for 1 senior Meridian engineer per quarter to fly the airline's routes as a working passenger, noting cabin systems performance and safety observation feedback. The first engineer to use the arrangement was a young woman who had joined Meridian 18 months earlier, straight out of graduate school. Her first flight was on a 3A. The airline also expanded its diversity and conduct training program, a program that had existed on paper but not in practice. They brought in an outside facilitator for the new version. The training used real case files, anonymized, factual, specific, to walk crew members through the decisions made in actual incidents and the consequences that followed. One of those case files was Flight 1174, October 14th. It was not presented as a story about a famous engineer. It was presented as a story about a person in a seat who was told he hadn't earned his place, and the training asked one question of every cohort that went through it. What would it have taken for you to see him differently? And then it asked the harder question, why didn't the room? If this story meant something to you, let it go where it can mean something to someone else. Share it, like it, subscribe, and ring the bell. And tell me, have you ever walked into a room carrying something that nobody could see and had to wait for the room to catch up? Here's what really gets me. Not the credential, not the fact that he helped design the plane she was standing in, although there is something breathtaking about that the very airframe beneath her feet, the wing geometry, the system's architecture that was holding all 212 passengers safely at 35,000 feet, had in part come from the mind of the man she was telling didn't belong. What gets me is the coffee. After the apology, after the 7-second silence on the operations phone, after everything, he asked for a coffee and said thank you and went back to his document. He didn't lecture, he didn't perform vindication, he just went back to work. Because the work was why he was there, the work was always why he was there. So here's my question for you. What do you carry that the room can't see, and what would it feel like to set it down and just go back to work?